Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? Can I say evening at 5 o'clock? But it's definitely not the usual time I come to this. As you can see from the frame there, if you don't tune into this show regularly, it's 12:30 till 1 o'clock on weekdays. But we're doing a bonus episode this week because it's jam-packed. We've rearranged the show. We usually do a Wellbeing Wednesday with Joe Turner talking about self-care, coaching, and being our better selves. And she's certainly helped many of us through that in recent months. And we definitely didn't want to miss this chance to do this episode, but we're just a bit congested schedule. So instead, we've sort of shoehorned it in today at 5 o'clock. So hope you can join us. I know many of you will tune in after the fact, of course, if you don't join us live. But Joe had proposed a really interesting episode today for sort of time and energy management of something that I know many of us struggle with, myself included, but also I think there are some unique features at the moment with regards to that. I think that there's some unique pressures for us to be productive and for us to be more stringent with our time as the world sort of threatens to open itself back up again, and for us to be able to get back to some level of our old normal as well as our new normal. So without further ado, again, as ever, as the technology allows, I should be able to bring you Joe Turner. Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hi, Jack.
Hello. Right, let me get that logo out of my face. So I think it's usually my opening question for you every time these days, which is, why did you propose this week?
Well, a few reasons, actually. Definitely the reasons you've just said, that it feels like a problem that lots of people are talking about at the moment, because as you quite rightly say, we're coming out of lockdown. And I think there's this sort of sense of maybe going back, but probably also a lot of moving into, there's that phrase, a new normal. And do you actually want what you used to do, what you're looking at in the future? I think it's a really good time for a bit of what I'd call a life audit. And alongside that, some focus on time and energy. But actually, with a smile, the other reason it's in my mind is because this is a problem I struggle with, and I struggle with it on a cyclical basis. So I would describe myself as someone who pathologically resists organization, and I have done for a long time. And I don't want this to be a whole biography, but my default is not to have lists and diaries and be uber organized. And I like to think I fly by the seat of my pants, and I'm there to be reactive and responsive to people. But it kind of goes in waves. And I've just had one of those episodes recently where I realized it's really not serving me well. And like everybody else, I'm looking at moving forward. And so I've done a bit of an audit over the last couple of weeks of myself, and I've spoken to a few clients about it. A few pennies have dropped again. It kind of frustrates me how many times these particular pennies have to drop, but it's really prominent for me at the moment.
Do the pennies drop because something goes majorly wrong, or like I often say, last week I said it to a couple of people, I'm spinning lots of plates. I'm always using that analogy, but I dropped a couple of plates last week, whereby eventually I just sort of take myself to capacity, and I only really notice that when those plates do smash, and I hope that they're not really expensive and important plates, you know. So with you, is it more that you kind of just come to realize on your own energy, or is it that actually it takes for something quite major to occur that then boots you in the bottom?
No, and I'm not a higher being than you, Jack. I dropped some plates last week as well. And that often is an indicator. And I have this funny tick, which a few people listening to this as healthcare professionals might identify with, is sometimes I notice that I start to try and fix people and things more energetically than normal. And I do quite a lot of it normally. So when it starts getting a bit like, I describe myself as a heat-seeking missile for things to fix. And, you know, that isn't me being a better clinician. That's me getting a bit stressed and a bit frantic and unfocused. So there's lots and lots of caring in a very sort of scattergun type way, and weirdly that's become my indicator. And yeah, that is an energy thing, I guess, because it becomes this real heightened quite stressy type fixing feeling.
So do you think that's because you're just becoming a bit more frantic because you're under pressure, or is it that you're projecting a little bit because really the thing that needs fixing is your own routine?
Quite possibly the latter. And
check me out, I'm a coach.
Yes, good question. And actually, one thing that I alluded to when I started, it's that resistance. So when I feel my resistance to organising myself getting stronger, I've learned to look at that, and that is a real coachy thing. You're always looking for when somebody really pushes back against you about something. Like, no, I don't like this. I'm not going to organise myself. And it's the way I would approach it is often to look at someone's value system. So again, talking personally, I've got a big value system around freedom. Apologies, got some work going on in our bathroom. I hope you can't hear it on this. But with values, they're things that motivate you, but they can either be things that motivate you towards something positive that you really, really want, or sometimes things which are really strong values for you are actually things that try to take you away from something you don't want. So for me, freedom is not always kind of looking to the sunshine hills and I've got this great vision of where it's a great free place where I do anything I want all the time. It's actually a bit of a reaction against doing what people tell me to do when they tell me to do it. And, that's just a tick in my personality. So I have to check, am I resisting organising just because I've got this funny little tick against being controlled by external forces? And that isn't a justifiable reason not to organise myself and my day and my week and my month.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen any of Jocko Willink's work. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't.
I mean, he's a beefcake Marine in the US, and he has a phrase that's discipline equals freedom.
Exactly.
What he's getting at with that is what you're just describing, is that essentially it's that you've got to try to understand that those things aren't necessarily conflicting. If that you're done properly, if you apply appropriate discipline, then sometimes that can really be freeing, because you're going to get various different things that you're going to get more done, is what he often talks about, but also what you've just described there psychologically. What's with regards to the contemporary factors affecting it? I said about how it feels like it really is prescient, and maybe we've both got caught up in that. I think with mine, I think it's less lockdown easing and more a therapy live next weekend. And it might be with yours. You're very involved in this show as well, of course. But what do you think are some of the things you're noticing, and maybe sort of themes you're noticing amongst your clients and your various different people you interact with? What's going on there, do you think?
Well, I think this whole COVID period has given us weird paradoxes, hasn't it? There have been times where we've been frantic, particularly business owners trying to sort things out in the early stages, and it was just a crazy time. And then maybe not so much if you're working in the NHS, but there will have been down times. And I think there's been quite a lot of period that people might have used for reflection. And if you haven't, then I think this is, like I say, a really good time to do a bit of a life audit and have a look at what are the things you genuinely love doing at work. What are the things that you would do even if you didn't get paid for them? Are there some things in your former life pre-COVID that you realise you were not really enjoying very much, and maybe you don't need to do anymore, or maybe you can do things differently? I mean, the obvious one that everyone talks about is Zoom meetings and not needing to always meet up with people. But are there certain type of patients that you were seeing a lot of that you don't have to? Is there another type of patient that you've realised you absolutely love and you'd rather spend more time doing that and devote more time to it? There might be all sorts of things, but I think it's a really good time to just take stock and think, well, there are so many things that we thought couldn't change that just got changed overnight. It just shows you that, that there is probably more choice than we think about what we do from here in terms of our careers anyway.
I think what I would agree with there especially is that's bringing with it some pressure, really, that should be quite freeing. But essentially, I think that the act of then always constantly having to reevaluate, generally speaking, people have intervals in their life of which they need to sort of offer resets, but generally speaking, there are constants. And because our constants have been taken away, the disruption to work patterns and to hobbies and friendships and all the different things that were of routine, or our constants being taken away, and then we've kind of then had to create this new and very restrictive normal. I think that one of the things that's occurring when they're trying to offer an opening up is that, and it feels like an offering, doesn't it? It feels like a favor all of a sudden. It's hilarious, you know. I'm like, allowed to go and hug someone again. It's now legal, right? So an offering of how kind of them. But what I mean is that then you've then to climb out of it, which is of course a massive positive. It still means you've still got to then think, right, routine's going to shift again, right? You've got to get into organization mode. You know, you're going to have to start considering things that we've been able to park up for a while. You know, it's been months since we've had to worry about socializing. And of course, it's a good problem for us to have, but it's still a problem of a sort. It's that you've still got to think more about it, and therefore got to consider it. And you've got to consider how much have I missed certain things, how much have I missed certain people, and that comes with it's a psychologically taxing event compared to not doing it. And I think that that's what seems to be happening at the moment, and especially when that overlays to professional stuff changing once again. I think that's what seems to be bothersome.
I guess it's a pressure if your belief is that you need to conform again. And there will be those of us that resist conforming, and I've just hinted that I'm probably in that camp. But, you know, maybe something some people have learned is that they really do love structure, and, you know, maybe in their job they want more structure than they had before. As an extreme, maybe you're a business owner and you realize, actually, all I want to do is turn up for work, get paid, go home at the weekend, not worry about it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you realize that about yourself, you're probably a much better employee than a business owner anyway. I don't think it all needs to go one way, but I guess what I hear in your question is an undertone of, oh gosh, all these obligations are going to come back in, and even, you know, dare I say it, social friends and family ones, and they're pretty hard to resist sometimes. But I know a lot of people that have really reviewed the more fringe social activities they're taking part in and just saying, I'm not doing that anymore because it doesn't fill me with joy. It's not where I get my biggest bonus in life from.
That's a really good point. I want to just, and I wasn't expecting to go here, but Audit will indulge. Although, you know, for those that are tuning in live, I did this with our guest earlier, David Poulter. I was selfish and I just got stuck into good conversation. That's Mondays for you. I mean, I have brilliant conversation, of course, over my weekends. But what I mean is, I get excited to be back on the show, and I therefore just end up hogging the guest. So let me ask the audience a question. If you're tuning in live, thank you for doing so on this bonus edition. But also, are you feeling any of that? Are you feeling any unique time and energy stresses or pressures that are struggling to manage? And if so, what are you trying to do to put in, you know, have you got any strategies in place you can share with us, or any specific questions on this topic? Because it's certainly something me and Joe seem like we're agreeing that we're both facing some recurrent issues, but also some novel ones as well. So please do get stuck in and get involved. On that though, Joe, what you've mentioned there is obligations. I know you rightly put a word to what I described there. That's accurate. But I also just want to check that, you know, what's your take on obligation as a you know, do you think that, because I think, yes, some people can feel overly obliged and dutiful, and it's not healthy, and it touches on a lot of what we've talked about before. But then also, I think, done to the extreme, then I think that, you know, if people strip themselves too far from obligation, then there descends chaos and selfishness, and that, you know, there is a funny balance to that. That's me admitting my take on it. Where are you on sense of obligation?
Yeah, and I'm, you know, don't get me wrong, on the spectrum, I am a massively well-behaved, sensible person that toes the line. And the obligation is mostly in my head. And I think, you know, when I say I'm trying to escape people telling me when to do things and what to do, I think what I really mean is I'm trying to escape myself, that restriction. And so I think I shared this with you in something the other day, Jack. My favourite phrase at the moment, which I heard from a doctor, is there are no systems, only what we agree to. And I've just been really, that phrase keeps coming back in my head, because we talk a lot about changing healthcare systems and culture and our workplace culture. and yet we sign up and we agree to things which, who decided how long a physio treatment should be? Who decided that everybody needs to work between certain hours? Who decides the price bracket that is reasonable in private practice? And I know lots of people listening will have addressed all these things and will be working in a beautifully independent way, but I think a lot of us just hold ourselves in really narrow tramlines. So to answer your question, I live by loads of obligations. And I get the sense that I'm just trying to nudge them a lot of the time to breathe a little bit, because I think healthcare can feel like a really obligated space.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sometimes useful just to check in with yourself as to work out, do I feel obliged or am I obliged? Like, you need to understand that perception meets reality type thing. And those aren't easy distinctions to make, but sometimes that is useful for you to know, is it that I'm putting that on myself? Or is it that truly there is something here that I am obliged to do, but it's also a reasonable obligation for in the pursuit of someone else, a loved one or something, a care for, there's like are you obliged to care for an elderly parent, and let's hope they've earned that to some extent. Now that need is something that therefore needs to be addressed if it's persistent. But in a moment-to-moment basis, we can't always just forego that obligation because it's something we might not feel pleasant, and that's kind of what burden a lot of people carry, especially any time. And so when the time pressures and energy pressures that come from news, from new challenges and new changes, I suppose it's those things that can get people down, and that can stop people feeling productive and also stop people feeling as much sense of enjoyment. What would be the strategies then, would you say, for tidying up a little bit, and what, especially if you feel you're admitting to succumbing to this? I think I'm probably somewhere in between, because I think I'm dispositionally, I think I'm completely what you're describing, but I've got such a chaotic schedule and so many projects, so many plates I'm spinning, that diaries and lists at the very least, maybe not getting through them and not always meeting those diarized obligations, but actually making them, it's just super essential. So I think I've kind of had to pursue that a lot more. But yeah, what strategies do you therefore employ in yourself, and what do you recommend for others?
Well, I think that going back to that conversation of obligations, that's where the life audit comes in. So you spend a Sunday afternoon dumping everything out that's in your life. Have a good look at it and work out where the red lines are. And obviously nobody can tell anybody else what are genuine obligations and what not. And you might surprise yourself that when you look closely, some of them can be nudged more than you thought they could. But draw your red lines in terms of your personal life obligations and things at work that even if you work privately and you own your own business, there will be certain times in the week where you absolutely have to be in a certain place and doing a certain activity. I would say pop all those in. But I think a really useful exercise also is a time tracker. So I've discovered brilliant apps you literally just create a load of list of activities, start it off when you start an activity, stop it when you finish, have a little look. Last time I did this, it looked really chaotic. There were 10-minute slots of time everywhere, dashing from one business to another business, one project to another project. If you can, once you've got your red lines, create an ideal timetable and try and bunch things together in a logical way. So if you have got an obligation and it's going to see your mum or something like that, really commit to it, because if it's kind of an obligation but you're not really committing to it, then you're not going to diarise it, and it's going to be this vague thing which nags in the back of your mind, and you'll try and squeeze it in somewhere where there isn't time, and then it just becomes a stress. Whereas if it's actually got its devoted time in the right place in your diary each week, then you'll be showing up the best you can at that moment. But this might be a stretch too far for some people, but you could also audit your energy levels. So day to day, month on month, if you're talking about women, might even be related to cycles, we definitely fluctuate in the type of energy we have and what we're up for. So you might know that by the time you get to Friday morning, all you want to do is be in your office on your own, and that might be the one time in the week where you can bear to look at spreadsheets and figures, and the rest of the time you're an extrovert people person. So as well as tracking what you actually need to do, I think it's really useful to track how you feel and see if there are patterns, and then have a look at if you can actually fit your diary items according to the energy that you have that's appropriate for that activity.
Good. One of my best friends, female, matches that up to a cycle quite tightly, having realised that that's something that's really important. Not for everyone. People don't necessarily always want to do that, but it's an example of a bit of it takes a bit of self-awareness to recognize what factors are at play in your energy levels, and also de-guilting that as much as possible, because there are so many factors and variables outside of control. And I think that sometimes, especially I think about the sort of pop science literature in the last 5 to 10 years, I think that it's been so psychology centric that I think sometimes it's removing some of the external factors, especially the endocrine hormonal factors that can affect things. Independent, obviously, I'm not just meaning here in women and menstrual cycles. I'm meaning just generally there's the fluctuations that can occur that are outside of that. Even metabolically with regards to food, etc., means that people need to come to understand themselves better, and also make sure that they recognize that sometimes beating yourself up for not being able to stay on task, there's sometimes a more complex phenomena at play there than just you being distracted and could have easily stayed on task if you only had more discipline. I think there's times where you can kick yourself and you probably could have done more or could have done better, but generally speaking, like when it comes to these bigger picture things, and actually people say I'd be more organized if I could get round to it. So generally speaking, I think there's something to be said for you've got to make a start somewhere. But just as an example, what you've just described there as being precursors to it, like recognize what factors are affecting you and individualize it, because that tends to be a common feature of your messages, is that there's some general principles, but generally you've got to work out what works for you.
And there are, you're right, there's women's cycles, there's seasonal cycles. So at this time we've just come out of one of the hard, not just a winter, but a really hard winter. And I don't know about you, but this weekend I've never been more aware of the effect of some sunshine on your well-being. It just seemed like the world was a different place this weekend, didn't it?
Absolutely.
But you're absolutely right about not beating yourself up. You've just been through a dark winter period, which even in normal times should be a time where, if you were working with seasons, everything would be lying low. I talk about going back to the earth, not a time to subject and really be running at firing on all cylinders. And now we're moving into the springtime. You might feel your energy naturally rise, and you might feel you want to go with that and surf the wave and get it stuck into those projects that you might have put off over the winter. But you're absolutely right, Jack, in that we do a lot of beating ourselves up and pushing through. And if we do go back to women's cycles for a minute, so just by the natural drop and then rise again of your estrogen and progesterone levels, most women will go through an energy slump just before menstruation, and then through menstruation it's sensible to have a quieter time, with the absolute knowledge that it's very likely that give it 3 or 4 days, you're going to suddenly get a big energy surge and you're going to be able to ride that. So rather than, as you say, thinking, why can't I do this job today? Right, I will just stay up till midnight and push my way through these figures or whatever. How much nicer just to go, well, do you know what? I'm going to acknowledge the fact that I feel this way and actually enjoy it, and then I will fully ride that energy wave when it comes in 3 days' time.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing, is it depends on what unit of time you're ever measuring yourself and your productivity on, because if it's something that you get the unit of time right, so instead of a day, you assess yourself on a week, then you could come to realize that even on fluctuations like that, then the tasks that you want to get done are better distributed more appropriately. And that might be not considering yourself, how have I gone on this week, how have I done this month? It's that's why when when it comes to task lists, I don't know what your take is on this, or whether you've got a personal favorite, but having, for me, it's that, you've got I always have a long list, but essentially you then just have things that naturally get bumped up it, rather than lots of little lists kind of annoy me. So that long list is something that is like, I set certain measures on it that definitely needs doing this, today, this week, this month, etc. But sometimes people have prefer a day-to-day list. Do you have a preference on that, or is it another one that's just individual specific?
I do mine weekly, and then that is just a personal thing. But very similarly, I use an ABC. So A, absolutely needs to happen. B, it would be nice. C, it could happen, but it's not the end of the world if it doesn't. And when you first look at the list, everything looks like an A, doesn't it? And you have to be quite strict.
How do you stop yourself beating yourself up, though? Not you personally, but I just mean like the royal you. When you don't get to, when it's like the 5 items on that list for today or for this week or something, and only 3 of them got done, it's like, feels like sometimes that list becomes something to beat yourself with, doesn't it?
Again, it's a choice, isn't it? So did you give each task enough time? Did something else intervene? Are you a lazy person? And I can't imagine, in your case, Jack, I would say the answer is no, and I imagine most of us the answer is no. What is the benefit of beating yourself up? That's more energy wasted. I think if you can look at it logically, and what's the benefit of it?
It can be I suppose I always think we've all got a capacity to be lazy. I don't think, I'd be gutted if I'm called many things, but lazy. Say again, sorry.
Let's change the word. So lazy is a massive judgment, isn't it? And how about I'm just someone that appreciates downtime, and sometimes I just like staring at the wall.
That's what I was meaning. Yeah, I think I get called many things, but lazy is rarely one of them, even by people that really hate what I do. I think what would be interesting, though, is that I have my times where I'm just super underproductive and feel lazy. And I think that when I notice that, it's actually a trigger for me to realize that I've not protected enough time away from this task list. I've not, because I'm clearly craving some thoughtless time. Just a bit of time away. And as you said, the weekend, the weather helped and protected a bit of time. I still need to get that swimming pool finished that I've told you about. It's nearly there now.
Would you ever diarise that time? Have you made that realization? Would you ever allow yourself a half day or a full day where that was just absolutely designated, call it lazy time?
I've tried that before, and I think that mine just feels better to be distributed. I don't. It takes for me, when we go away on holiday, unfortunately, it takes a bit of climbing down, and therefore to take a half day or a day, it wouldn't be long enough, and then it would just feel like I spent it regretting having done it, because the unit of time that it would be to wind down. But I've heard people have some real success at that, and I think I would like to do that. I aspire to have that sort of diary discipline, but also the nature of my job means I do. The flexibility is inherent to it, the availability to be sort of more bendy. It's like I can't book into your diary and sort of like, and I don't mean for patients now, but I mean the sort of interprofessional work means that flexibility does seem to stand me out. So maybe there's my excuses I'm putting in, but no.
And we're so achievement and productivity focused, aren't we? It's like you get to the end of the day and tick, 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 well done me, good. Imagine if we just reframed it and yes, I took 2 hours off and I read a book. Good on me, because that's done me a load of good. It's going to make me better tomorrow. Exactly. Just legitimize it.
And also that's the thing, is that I think there's a lot of guilt that's been laid in. Have you seen The Social Dilemma? Have you seen and so people are then just they get stuck on the slot machine of Facebook or something, and then they feel really guilty for wasting 20 minutes and stuff. And it's like, there's something to be said for the way we were being manipulated in that direction. However, there's also something to be said for the fact that you might have bloody enjoyed it. There's something, especially when a lot of us are blurring the lines between personal and professional and stuff, and that fundamentally sometimes that might be interlinked with your social life or interlinked with your professional life in such a way that, you know, I've stopped allowing myself to feel guilty in that direction. It definitely needs to apply some discipline, but you also don't want to get carried away on that, you know, just lashing yourself as usual. We best wrap up, mate. That's flown by at half an hour. Thanks for that. But what I wanted you to just give us a bit of an insight to is you're speaking at Therapy Live Pelvic Health on Saturday. This could have been bad if you'd have gone, am I? Yes, yeah. So you are. Tell the folks a little bit about what you've got planned for us and how it maps onto the conversations we've been having today and before on our Wellbeing Wednesday shows.
So I'm going to give a talk entitled "Are You Giving Too Much of Yourself?" And some of the stuff that I've talked about today will come into that. So I'm going to look a little bit about, you know, what it means to be a health professional and what things are taking our energy and our time, and whether we can actually, it's quite a lot of questions in my talk. Can we actually do anything about that? Do we want to? Would we give any less if we were asked to or given the opportunity? Or is it about what you feed in? And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the strategies that you and I have touched on today, particularly as it's a pelvic health conference. I want to talk about this idea of acknowledging not just cycles, but differences between men and women, and how we, at our extremes, function in what's ideal for us. And is the workplace acknowledging that there are any differences between us, or is it just trying to squeeze us all into this one homogenized being or way of working? And I've probably put far too many slides in, but I also want to talk a little bit about healthcare systems as well, and, you know, whether are we up for changing anything, or do we just want to keep fitting ourselves around it?
No, that's it. Yeah, how much are we trying to shape it and change it, and how much have we given up on the template and the cookie cutter that we've been given? Thank you so much. I'm so looking forward to that and working with you again at the weekend. But yeah, tell folk a little bit about where they can find you on social media once more.
Well, now you can find me on Twitter a bit more at Turner Fizzy Joe, and on LinkedIn. And very soon I'm going to have a website go live. The address for that is mehab.com, and attached to that a community called MeHub. And I think both of those, well, hopefully by the weekend, people might be able to sign up to. Oh, I've lost you, Joe.
Hello.
Oh, back here.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks a lot for that. I'll speak to you all soon, and join me tomorrow. Who have I got on the show tomorrow? I've got a jam-packed show. Oh, I'm not on tomorrow, am I? It's the takeover, the student takeover, 12:30. The First Steps team will be taking over for some student and new graduate bits and pieces that they've got planned for you, and then I'll see you later in the week.